All right, it is stimulus update time. Where is this battle going? I see four key areas where Congress is going to be duking it out over the next few weeks as they sit down and go forward with these negotiations over the stimulus once the Senate comes back from its recess. But meanwhile, these negotiations are already starting, folks. This back and forth is already starting. But one of the key areas that is measuring up right now is unemployment. Unemployment benefits, which are set to run out in the next few weeks. And that is going to be big trouble for a lot of Americans looking for that $600 per week stimulus that they would get on their unemployment benefits. Those are about to dry up. And Nancy Pelosi was fired up about this yesterday. She came out on CNN speaking about the importance of doing something to make sure that the evictions that are about to expire, the moratorium on evictions in many states, and the unemployment benefits better get tackled first. This should be one of the first things that they discuss. Take a listen.
I want to begin, if I can, on economic relief for Americans going through the economic effects of this. As you know, that additional $600 unemployment benefit, it's going to end in just 2 weeks. Can you find common ground before then with Republicans?
Well, I certainly hope so. Not only will that end, but the unemployment benefits will end. The last checks will be going out the last week in July. So it is absolutely urgent that we pass the legislation, the HEROES Act, where we had proposed this. Tomorrow will be 2 months since we passed the HEROES Act with the putting money in the pockets of the American people, the unemployment insurance and the direct payments. You talked about the moratorium on evictions ending now. We have over almost $200 billion in there, $100 billion to help renters and $75 billion to help people meet their mortgage payments, as well as more other money for people who are homeless and rural housing specific initiatives. Very important.
Yeah, so evictions, $100 billion that's in the HEROES Act. Now remember, Mitch McConnell has said that this is dead on arrival. And he further said that just the other day, that the HEROES Act that the House passed 2 months ago, while the Senate's been flinting around on beaches and golf courses, has been sitting there. So they've just been dragging this out, hoping for good jobs numbers so that they can say no more stimulus. Well, guess what? Proof is in the pudding right now. And when you see coronavirus cases going off the charts and states having to go under lockdown again, and people with those unemployment benefits set to expire in the next few days, evictions it's going to be a tsunami of evictions. I'm just terrified about what that's going to look like for people in certain areas because of those moratoriums being lifted in a lot of states. So the HEROES Act has been sitting on the Senate's desk. Now, yes, there's a lot to not like about the HEROES Act. There's plenty of garbage in that thing. Absolutely. So if you're starting negotiations, start with the garbage, cut out the garbage. Republicans could say, we don't want, money for illegal immigrants. We don't want money for cannabis suppliers. We don't want money for national parks. We don't want money for the arts. Whatever else is in this thing, bloated, cut it. Good. Do it. Start there. But to say that it's dead, not even to touch it, it's dead on arrival. So what's going to happen with all these evictions? What's going to happen with renters and landlords who have, mortgages, and they're waiting on these tenants to be able to pay their rent so that they can pay their mortgages? Again, this is why all the banks have $28 billion set aside right now. This is why Wells Fargo, Chase, JP Morgan, why they all have this $28 billion slush fund sitting there waiting for this foreclosure crisis, which is about to unfold. They're ready, and it's going to happen. And it's not just about the banks. Like, the banks will be okay because the Federal Reserve will always bail them out, right? It's always going to be fine for the banks. They're always too big to fail. But what about the people who lose their homes? And what about the people who are kicked out and are now homeless, who are renters? And what about the people who lose their homes to foreclosure? We already have a housing crisis in this country. We don't have enough of them. We don't have enough affordable housing. So we're just going to deepen this problem if we don't do something about it. So I sure hope Republicans get their head out of the sand on that piece of it specifically. Unemployment benefits set to expire in the next few weeks. Now, there has been much discussion. The CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, has said that $600 per week has prohibited people from going back to work. That's a disincentive. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Have you received any of this type of stimulus money, unemployment benefits that are more than what you make at work? Is it a disincentive for you to get back to work? Tell me, be honest with me. We are hearing that up to 2/3 of individuals who receive these unemployment benefits, according to the data, are making more than they're making in their employment. So it seems like it might be a disincentive, but it puts the onus now on the employer to report them to the unemployment office, and you go through that whole rigmarole. And these unemployment offices are slammed as it is. Are they going to now be auditing and playing police officer, having to go out and try to find out whether or not this person was legitimately laid off? So add layers of bureaucracy there. Well, Stephen Moore is a White House economic advisor. He had some thoughts about this $600 unemployment benefit. He is one of President Trump's economic advisors. He's an economist. I've interviewed Stephen for many, many years on my show. He's a very smart economist. He believes that this $600 a week for unemployment benefits is a disaster, and we need to get rid of it immediately.
The single most important thing we have to do going forward is stop the $600 a week payments. We estimate we've probably already lost 1 to 2 million jobs because of those payments. And we estimate with my buddy Casey Mulligan, the top labor economist in the country, that if President Trump were to sign a bill that extended those benefits for another 6 months, we would have about 8 to 10 million fewer jobs by the end of the year. It's a very significant negative. We have 30 million unemployed people today, and yet the biggest problem employers are talking about right now is they can't get workers back on the job because 4 out of 5 workers are making more money for staying unemployed than getting back on the job. That is a very, very economically destructive plan.
All right, unemployment benefits is the first big battle. The second big battle is over liability protection. Now, I thought that this would have been something they would have been trading back and forth on, right? The Senate Republicans want, Senate Republicans led by Mitch McConnell want liability protection for businesses, for a 5-year moratorium on being able to sue somebody if you go back to work and get sick. That's what Republicans want. That's what Mitch McConnell wants. What Democrats want and what they've passed in the HEROES Act is an OSHA provision, which would not only make it safer for people to go back to work, but would also protect owners. So what it does is, I'll just kind of break it down a little bit, and Nancy Pelosi is going to explain it here in a second, but a company would basically have to set up protections at the company. Now, I don't know how they can afford that. A lot of small businesses are not going to be able to afford it. I don't know where they're going to get this money, Nancy. I don't know where they're going to get this money to be able to set up plexiglass screens, put in hand sanitizer stations, or whatever it happens to be under this new provision. And again, it's not finalized, but this is an OSHA provision in the HEROES Act. So they would have to make their business OSHA compliant for coronavirus, and then they would be protected from litigation because they've taken those protections. It would protect the workers, which I agree with. So if they're nervous about going back to work, it would protect workers, but it would also protect the owners at a cost. So the devil's in the details on all of this. Maybe there's some kind of common ground they can come to, but it appears, if you listen to Nancy Pelosi, they're not budging on this. They're not going to be looking for this liability protection for these companies to never be sued if they don't take precautions to protect workers. So there's this back and forth, protect the worker, and Republicans are saying we want to protect the owner, but where's the protection for the worker? So listen to Nancy Pelosi. It doesn't sound like she wants to budge on this at all.
Liability protection, is that something that you'd be willing to give on?
Well, what does he mean by that? Does he mean essential workers have to go to work? If they don't, they lose their unemployment insurance, and if they get sick there, they have no recourse? I think a better path would be for them to join us in our OSHA, a strong OSHA provision that is in the HEROES Act. We've had it in every bill, they've not accepted it, but once again, a strong OSHA provision, which gives protection not only to the worker, but to the employer. If in fact they put into place the precautions, the protections that are in the OSHA bill, if someone gets sick, they have been protected because they've honored, the OSHA rule.
So there you go. So it doesn't sound like she's going to be budging on that. Well, then that means they're not going to pass a bill. So obviously this is the beginning salvo. You're starting to see these TV interviews now, and this is going to only get worse over the next few weeks until they get down to negotiations. So each of them lobbying the things that they want right now. But I can tell you that it doesn't appear that Democrats are going to budge on this liability protection piece. It also doesn't appear that they're going to budge much on the state and local funding. This is another big piece. This is number 3 on my list of big battle key areas right now that are being debated. State and local funding. And it doesn't appear, if you're listening to White House economic advisors, Larry Kudlow and others over the past few days, it does not appear that there's going to be much movement from Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and the White House on giving more money to the states. To states that are been badly bleeding. Early in this pandemic, we were hearing it being called by Mitch McConnell the blue state bailouts. Well, it's gone beyond blue states now, as you well know. Now it's well into red states. And many governors, both Republican and Democrat, have been calling on Congress to help them because they are bleeding capital right now, having to furlough state workers, essential workers. They don't have money to pay them. So you have law enforcement at the state level that's being furloughed. You have all kinds of workers who should be on the front lines right now being furloughed because they can't pay them. You can keep your health benefits, but we can't send you a paycheck. So all of these states are being hammered right now. So will state and local funding get through the Senate? This is going to be one of the biggest battle pieces right now. Because again, it comes down to price tags, right? Because under the HEROES Act, Nancy Pelosi and the House wanted $3 trillion in the HEROES Act. We're hearing that it's likely to be near $1 trillion if the Senate passes their bill. Well, in the HEROES Act alone, there was $1 trillion set aside for the state and local governments. So if the total package is $1 trillion, will states get anything? And the fourth big battleground in the next round of stimulus discussions right now is the direct stimulus checks. And if we see any checks at all, it could only be up to the $40,000 threshold for adjusted gross income. So will Democrats be able to push back against Republicans who do not want to increase the amount, and who do not want to send another round of stimulus checks, direct stimulus checks to those people who are most in need? We have heard from Mitch McConnell talking about targeted in the health sector or the services sector, in the hospitality sector, up to about $40,000. So maybe there's going to be some in there for direct stimulus payments, but beyond that, maybe not much for those people making more than that amount, that adjusted gross income. There's a number of other things that are currently on the table. State and local tribal funding. Democrats have made additional funds for state, local, and tribal governments as their number one priority in the next package. $1 trillion would go to states. It would help out tribal areas as well. President Trump wants that payroll tax cut. Will Democrats go along with that? Remember, this is how the government makes money. The government is bleeding money. They're not making any money right now. So with a payroll tax cut, the government's going to be bleeding even more money. And how will we fund Social Security? The size of the cut and other details haven't been released yet. And a lot of Republicans are not on board with that tax cut, the paycheck tax cut. Education and funds for schooling. Also a big piece in this. Republicans have made children getting back to school a huge focus of this. They've signaled they want to make additional funds for schools, a central piece of the next package. Democrats, they're on board with more funding for schools, but they've been cautious right now for children to go back to school because of the pandemic. So they agree that schools need more funding, but they don't agree that kids should be going back necessarily yet. Funding for hospitals is also on the table during the next stimulus. Testing and hazard pay for workers. Democrats and Republicans have highlighted the needs for more testing, and liberals are pushing for billions more to rapidly expand testing. Bipartisan proposals have also been floated for increased funding for rural hospitals and hazard pay for frontline workers, something that the president has also said he would support. Many of you keep asking me about hazard pay, frontline worker support. There is support from the White House on that. The House Democrats' plan in the HEROES Act has a $200 billion fund to help for hazard pay and frontline workers. Will Republicans go for that? That's the big question. Auto dealers, restaurants with ties to lawmakers were among the firms that got PPP loans, of course. So this time around, we would, congressional leaders are looking right now at having additional extending Small Business Association Paycheck Protection Program, but for making sure that the businesses who need it most get it. So this would be extended. That's another big piece. And finally, another huge piece that's being discussed right now according to sources who have knowledge of these negotiations, infrastructure spending. Republicans and Democrats have repeatedly cited the need for additional infrastructure spending because, look, bridges, roads crumbling, but should this be a part of the stimulus? We know that when you do these types of programs, it takes a while for that money to flow into the economy, or the benefits of that to show up in the economy. And remember the criticism, of course, during Obama years for shovel-ready projects. A lot of these companies that were, a lot of people who said these companies were, had given money to the Obama campaign and were lobbyists and so forth, were getting money in these cushy contracts like Solyndra and others. So do we want to go through that again? Do we want to have, all these cushy contracts and crony capitalism happening again? So I don't know. Let me know your thoughts on that. So also about this August recess. So folks, all of this comes under the umbrella or the constrained timeline of a 2-week period when they get back on July 20th and 21st to Washington to start going over this bill. Mitch McConnell says we will see a bill at the beginning once they get back. So they're going to put forth the basics of it, and then they'll go back and forth and debate. Back and forth, back and forth. That leaves us just 2 weeks until they are set to go on their August recess. So will Democrats, in a showing of leadership, say, hey, Republicans, you're not going anywhere. You're not taking an August recess until we get this done? So asked about that question, Nancy Pelosi said she will cancel the August vacation for Democrats and the House of Representatives and keep them in Washington until they get this thing done. Listen.
Recess is fast approaching. Would you be willing to forgo that or delay that to get to a deal to extend benefits?
Oh, we absolutely have to. We also have to come to an agreement. The timetable is the timetable of the American people, needing their unemployment insurance, their direct payments, their assistance for rent and mortgage foreclosure, forbearance in terms of that, and we need it for states and localities to be able to pay their employees who are meeting the needs of their constituents. And you know what? We need it to open the economy by testing, tracing, treating, isolating. We need to do that, and we call upon the President of the United States to employ the Defense Production Act so that we can have the equipment to test, the equipment to evaluate the test. It's no use taking a test if you're not going to find out for a week whether you're positive or negative. The PPE that is necessary for the schools needs to be produced under the Defense Production Act. So this is a path to opening the economy and opening our schools. For some reason, the president has resisted that, but this is an absolute must.
So delay in August recess, Nancy Pelosi says yes. She was like, oh, yeah, I'm planning on canceling it for the House of Representatives. So let's see if the Senate does the same thing, if they can't get on the same page. So if you enjoy business news and stimulus updates and what's going on with your money, your debt, growing your family, and becoming smarter with money, please subscribe to our channel. I really appreciate it. Just hit the subscribe button. Thank you so much for your support, and smash that like button if you'd be so kind. Grover thanks you. I thank you. And we'll see you back here tomorrow on the show. Be safe, be kind to everyone. And we'll see you next time, everyone. Much love to all of you.